This is the Bryan Hyde Show.
Well, hello there and welcome to the show. Yes, I'm back. I've been away for a few days. I know it probably gives the impression, wow, he takes a lot of vacations, but I'm telling you, this is not the kind of vacation that you want to take. I was actually moving, which for some reason I always seem to pick the hottest part of the year to do that, but I'm safely in my new studio in an undisclosed location, and I have Eric Peters from Eric Peters Autos on the line with me. Eric, how are you today?
Well, I'm good, and I'm glad to hear that you haven't been summarily replaced by some unknown broadcaster.
No, they really can't find anybody to take this job. It doesn't pay enough. Oh, did I mention I work for myself?
Like we were talking about before we got on the air a little bit, it's just so incredibly amazing that just like that, Biden's gone and off the radar. Nobody talks about him. And of course, that's exactly what they want, is for people to stop talking about Joe Biden. And now we've got to deal with his very democratically selected replacement.
Oh, my word. Yeah. How many votes were cast for her again? Well, not one, actually. Okay, then.
Yeah, I mean, I'm waiting to see what's going to happen at the convention, if anything, because now why even bother having a convention, right? I mean, she's been, as far as I've been able to determine, officially anointed the standard bearer of the Democrats for the 2024 presidential cycle. So why bother with the convention?
Right.
It's a foregone conclusion.
The Politburo has spoken. The thinking is done.
Mm-hmm. But I'm glad that they're going to do it, because maybe there'll be some fracas there. You know, it'll be sort of a proof of pudding, if you will, to see whether these people who constantly preach about democracy actually get their panties in a bunch about the lack of democracy when it came to the selection of their own front person.
Yeah, well, you know, with the whole big tech and media spin machine covering for them, something tells me that there's a better than not chance that they may pull this off. And that kind of sickens me.
Yeah, me too. I think they're probably going to be able to do it. And the thing that worries me even more is that they're going to be able to do it again come November.
Yeah, it's there's a lot of stuff in motion and a great deal of uncertainty. But, despite all that, I still feel pretty encouraged. And this may sound Pollyanna-ish, and it's okay if people want to dismiss it as that. But I'm going to throw in, for instance, my move this last week. One of the hardest ones I've had to do, because it was pretty short notice, but the number of people who turned out and helped me really went a long way to restoring my faith in humanity. And I guess my point is simply, there's a lot of good out there. Sometimes if you can't see it, maybe you need to be the source of that good, but it's there. And don't get caught up in the political melodrama to the point that you think that's the only thing that matters.
No, I really like what you just said. And I think we should all be careful to bear in mind that the bad people are being amplified. I mean, you turn on the news or you go online, whatever you're doing with regard to access to information these days, and you think the world is coming unglued. And I'm not saying that there aren't a lot of problems, but I do think that they are being amplified out of all proportion. And it's easy to give in to despair and frustration and think, we live in a madhouse and there's nothing that we can do about it. So we might as well break out a bottle of the good stuff and sit in the lawn chair and just watch the world end. Right. I don't think it's that bad yet, and I hope it doesn't become that bad.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm looking out my window right now at potato fields. And this is not a flex. To some people, it might seem like it, but some people would look out there and say nothing, but there's nothing there, man. But I'm looking out there and I'm seeing peace and I'm seeing quiet. I see beauty. Now there's gnats. If I want to go outside, the gnats are pretty bad right now. But I think a lot of it comes down to, can you adapt? In fact, I'm off on a tangent here, but I really want to get your take on this. We moved into a home that does not have air conditioning. And right now, my 16-year-old daughter is having a come apart because she has been used to a certain level of comfort, and we deserve this level of comfort. And it just really makes me think we're very accustomed to things being comfortable and easy. And when we bump into a little bit of adversity or we have to adjust our level of comfort down a notch or two, that is traumatic for a lot of people.
Well, sure. Interesting that you mentioned that, because your daughter, being 16, has grown up in a world where air conditioning in cars is ubiquitous. What every new car comes standard with it. You and I grew up in a world where air conditioning was, generally speaking, a luxury item that you found in higher end cars. So, we got used to opening the wing vent windows. Your daughter probably has no clue what that is, and keeping the windows rolled down and dealing with it. The air conditioning in my truck is erratic. There's something wrong with it that I have to figure out. So oftentimes I just have to roll down the windows, and it's not that big a deal because I grew up that way, and like you say, you just sort of have to reboot a little bit and not be so sensitive to these minor inconveniences because they are minor.
And it may sound, again, like, well, you're just avoiding the reality. But my point is, even in less than optimal circumstances, you can adapt your point of view or adapt your sense of what is good in the world and still come out pretty happy with the way things are. And that's really what I've kind of had to do. And yes, it's not optimal. It's not what I really would have wished for. But again, I'm looking around me and I'm seeing peace. I'm seeing a lot of beauty. And I have incredible neighbors far away from me, as luck would have it. But anyway, I'll take it. I would suffer some discomfort in order to have that greater measure of freedom. And I'm offering that for whoever needs to hear that at this moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And to get into my bailiwick of cars, there's peace to be had in having an older, even if it's a little beat up, paid for vehicle, and not having to sweat the monthly payment that's coming up.
I'm with you.
Like that.
Well, let's talk cars for a moment here. I noticed you had a new piece published about Toyota, and I got to confess, Eric, when I hear Toyota, I'm like, oh yeah, man, that's that's the old standard. Why, no wonder they command such high resale value and so forth. But you're telling me Toyota is having a little crisis of confidence.
Well, it's a big crisis, and I'm going to defend Toyota because in the first place, I'm a big fan of the company. They have a deserved reputation for building really well thought out, well engineered vehicles and drivetrains that can typically be counted on to last a very long time. It's common for Toyota cars and trucks to go 20 years and 250,000 miles before anything major and majorly expensive fails. Unfortunately, that seems to be changing, and it's not Toyota's fault per se. What's happened is that Toyota, like all the other car companies, is under tremendous pressure to figure out ways to continue to produce vehicles that comply with the ever more stringent regulations that are emanating from Washington. So in this case, what's happened is that the Tundra pickup, which was previously powered by the 5.7-liter V8 that Toyota has been making for decades, which is just an anvil reliable engine, they had to pull it off the market because it uses too much gas. And of course, it emits too much of the dread gas carbon dioxide that plays no role whatsoever in air pollution. So the solution was, well, what are we going to do? Well, they came up with a twin-turbo V6 that's about half the physical size, with turbos there to boost the engine to produce the power on demand, with the idea that that's going to save some gas and it's going to reduce the emissions of some gas. But they're having problems with this engine, whether it's the result of a design problem or a manufacturing problem. They've had to replace more than 100,000 engines, basically brand new trucks, because this model's only been available since the 2022 model year. We're only a little bit more than halfway through 24. So it's only been on the market for about a year and a half. Absolutely devastating to the brand equity. If you can imagine it, you just spent $50,000-$60,000 on a new truck and it needs a new engine already.
Wow.
And now it's gotten worse.
Yeah,
the latest news is the Toyota Tacoma, which is their mid-sized pickup, one notch down from the Tundra, that was considered to be one of the best trucks on the market, and rightly so, came with a base four-cylinder engine without a turbo. Wasn't powerful, but it was very reliable. The optional engine was a V6, no turbo, again, very reliable. They had to pull both those engines for the same reasons, and in their place, a turbo hybrid four-cylinder engine. And now they're having problems with the transmission in that vehicle, and the manual and the automatic, if you can believe it. They're having transmission failures after less than 1,000 miles of driving. Brand new vehicle. This is going to kill Toyota if they don't get a handle on this very quickly. And it's an industry-wide problem because the manufacturers are all just scrambling desperately to get new stuff into production to satisfy the federal regulations.
Man, if there was ever a case to be made for getting the government out of the mandate business, that's it right there.
Sure. And in this respect, and I kind of brought this up in the article, it's just bizarre when you think about it that the government is even involved in this. Why is the government in any way, shape, or form telling you or me or anybody else how many miles per gallon the vehicle that we buy can use? I'm making a choice. Maybe I want a reliable V8 engine and I'm willing to suffer the 16 or 17 miles per gallon that it gets because it's worth it to me to have a reliable V8 engine that's going to pull my trailer and isn't going to break for the next 200,000 miles. But oh no, the government says it's got to get 3 or 4 miles per gallon better than that. So now I have to buy a much more expensive twin turbo V6. It's probably going to fall apart on me before the warranty's even over.
All right, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit here, Eric. Toyota used to be, at least for me, that was the name synonymous with, if somebody says, well, I'm looking at a Toyota thinking I'll buy it. I was always like, well, you can't go wrong with the Toyota. They run forever. You take good care of it. It'll last you, longer than any other car out there. So who do you consider to be the best bang for the buck or the most reliable? Now that Toyota, unfortunately, is facing this crisis of confidence, is there anybody else or are they all being affected like Toyota is?
Just go back 2 years. Buy a Toyota made before about 2 years ago and you're fine. And the same with regard to Honda. Honda used to be essentially as good as Toyota in terms of, hey, this is a really safe choice to make. If you bought an Accord V6, for example, and I've got family members who have those cars, those things lasted 250,000 miles. Just a great engine. You can't get it anymore. The new Accord comes only with a 4-cylinder turbo hybrid drivetrain.
Wow.
And this is just across the spectrum. They're all this way now. And in addition to that, you've also got all of this creepy Big Brother technology. You've got these touch screens that are both annoying and, in my opinion, guaranteed to render the vehicle prematurely obsolete because it's not going to be supported. You can imagine. You've got your cell phone. Imagine what your cell phone is going to be like, say, 6 or 7 years from now. Well, now you've got a cell phone just like that built into the dashboard. And what's going to happen 6 or 7 years from now? No longer supported, or it glitches out. And because everything is controlled through the touchscreen, you have to replace it. And if you can't find a replacement for it or it's too expensive, basically you're going to end up having to throw the car away.
Yeah, I again, the Dr. Bryan's diagnosis, too much government. It seems like that's the root cause of a lot of problems today.
Yeah, we've gotten away from the ideal that the founders had, wherein if you've got to have government, it's a necessary evil in order to preserve some sort of order, to have some kind of mechanism for seeing to it that people don't kill, rape, and murder each other, and to redress their grievances if you've got a dispute, rather than just going over to your neighbor with a baseball bat and hitting him over the head because he did something to your property. You go to court, you deal with it, and the judge settles it. Those basic functions of government have now become the incidental functions of government. And what we've got is a government that largely preoccupies itself with micromanaging our lives in ways that it has absolutely no legitimate business to do.
Hear, hear. Say, can we shift gears for a moment here and just talk a little bit about, I know the Olympics were on a lot of people's minds, and I kind of wanted to get your take on, I don't know if you had any thoughts on the opening ceremonies, which was kind of freaky in and of itself, but I think the thing that really got a lot of people's attention was the boxing competition where you have genetically male competitors beating the crap out of their female competitors.
Well, it's so tiresome and it's so tendentious. Everybody understands, even though some people won't say it because they're afraid of getting sanctioned, everybody knows that if the French authorities had sanctioned something that mocked the faith of Islam, had put forward, say, an obese lesbian, transsexual, or whatever it was, as the representation of the Prophet Muhammad, Paris would be burned to a cinder by now.
Oh, yeah.
It's just acceptable to mock Christians in the West now. And yes, that's exactly what that was. It was a purposeful attempt to deride and mock the Christian faith particularly. And then with regard to what you just said about the competition, just to mock human decency. There was a time where if a man, a biological male, and I don't care whether he's had pieces of him removed, I don't care whether he's been taking female hormones. If a biological man stepped into a ring, a boxing ring with a woman, and proceeded to beat her up, men would have beat that guy up. And first of all, it wouldn't have come to that because it never would have been allowed. The culture has been so gaslit and so beaten down that people will sit there and watch such a thing happen. It's an absolute obscenity.
Well, and when somebody does speak up, suddenly you've got this whole machine arrayed against them to convince them, oh, well, here's the technicality by which you're wrong, and here's why this is okay. And I mean, I saw these puff piece, news stories come out after the boxer, I think it's Algerian, was complaining about the hatred that's being projected toward me is so, demoralizing. And it seems like we are being not only gaslit, but it's like we're part of this giant psyop.
Well, it is, and this business of the tranny stuff is actually superficial and incidental. The purpose of it, in my opinion, if they can get people to accept that a biological man is in fact a woman, literally, and should be treated and regarded as such, even to the extent of being permitted to get into a boxing ring or a swimming meet with actual women, if they can make us accept that and present that as morally correct, then they can make us accept anything they say. Because basically the point of this is to completely negate the concept of objective reality, and to frame anybody who talks about objective reality, such as the fact that there are only two sexes, male and female, which is a biological fact, regardless of how you feel about it. If they can get people to negate that, well, they can tell us anything just per Orwell, and we were going to be required to believe it.
And there's another conundrum which comes up here, and this is one that I think I have heard you speak on, or at least write about, and that is that there comes a point where really you don't need to try to accommodate hostile opponents. In other words, if you have paid the price to know what is right, or to know what is true, or what is real for that matter, you don't have to apologize. And I guess it's time to act like you know you're right. And that doesn't mean you're arrogant and condescending. It just means ignore the people who want to fight, and ignore the people trying to draw you into their, sophistry, and just don't give in. Don't apologize for your beliefs. Just live like your beliefs are true, and stop, giving people who want to tear you down the energy to do so.
Well, don't apologize for telling the truth is how I would put it. And it's one thing to be willing to, be polite and be deferential toward, let's say you have a neighbor who happens to be a man who wants to be called Brenda and wears a dress and has lipstick and all. I'm not going to go out of my way to make fun of Brenda. But when Brenda tells me that he wants to be able to use the women's bathroom, that's where I draw the line, and I'm not polite about it anymore. I'm not going to tolerate that. That's the distinction that's being made here. People's compassion and instinct to be polite and civil is being used against them, and it's time people understood that and pushed back against it.
Yeah, and this is not about, because we are right and we're going to show them that we're right. It's because if we don't, we are giving up some essential things that have kept humanity going, through some really rough times. And without, I guess I'll just come right out and say it. If we don't do this, we essentially surrender humanity. Don't do that.
We do. And we surrender our kids too. I mean, think about it logically. If we are to accept this idea that a man with a penis can go into a women's changing room, per Leah Thomas and that fiasco, what defense have you got against somebody who says they're a minor attracted person, a 50-year-old man who says he identifies as a 12 or 13-year-old and wants to play doctor with other 12 and 13-year-olds? What are you going to say about that? He's just being authentically himself, and it's not a crime. He's actually a 12-year-old. That's where this kind of stuff is headed ultimately. And
it has to be said, standing for that standard of right and wrong, or real or not real. In other words, he may think he's a woman, but a few injections or incantations doesn't make him one. What we're saying here is we are the one. We're not forcing anybody into anything, and so we don't need to apologize for holding to those standards, particularly as it comes to protecting kids.
So I agree, and there is a distinction to be made between eccentricity and mental illness. So, for example, a man who dresses like a woman but is absolutely aware, hey, I'm a man, I just like to wear women's clothing. I'm a transvestite. That's the old school form for what that person is. I view that as relatively harmless because he's sane. He understands he's a man. He's not trying to tell you that he's a woman. Whereas a person who is a man, who insists that he actually is a woman in the literally true sense, that person shouldn't be accommodated. That person is mentally ill and in need of therapy, period.
And more importantly, if that person is trying to use legislation to force you to participate in their delusion, that's not a good thing. I mean, if you want to control other people, that's a pretty hateful mindset.
It is, and it's hateful to normalize mental illness. We've talked many times over the last several years about what went on during the pandemic. And that's what happened. We normalized pathological hypochondria. That's what we saw with people who were walking around cringing in desperate fear of some unseen virus. That normalized a mental illness. And I don't think it's coincidental that we've seen other manifestations of mental illness, such as this transition in business, percolate upward in the wake of that.
Eric, this is why I'm grateful to be friends with you. You are a voice of reason, and I think we need that voice more than ever as our world continues to get just a little crazier. Thanks again for your time today.
Oh, absolutely, Brian. Thank you for having me on. I always enjoy our talks.
All right, I want to direct people to your website. I've got a link in today's show notes. It's ericpetersautos.com. Eric, I look forward to our next conversation. I can only imagine what the next week will bring.
You and me both.
All right, we'll talk then.
This is the Bryan Hyde Show.